however bad the 1619 project was, the 1776 thing they put out is it's not even close to any sort of scholarly quality.
Right.
It's embarrassing.
I like the 1776 project. I like the idea
I
of
like the idea.
of restoring, a sense that the country has some special traditions, that it's not about its injustices
Yeah, well,
and
I
that
agree
sort of
with that,
thing.
but the execution
Yeah.
is just execrable. It's just embarrassing.
Well,
To have the leaders of the right be this awful um, uh,
well, you
is
know,
excruciating, is it not? To have
I
the representative of conservative being Donald J. Trump, at some point, it's a joke.
well, as we say, this is a very complicated system, and it was an interesting thing to, you know, it throughout the Trump administration, there was always the belief that this couldn't actually be it. This isn't what's really going on. Like, so behind the scenes, there must actually be some people who are really knowledgeable about the complexity of this system and are really working to, uh, you know, figure things out. But apparently there were not. You know what I mean?
Apparently,
And
it was quite clear from the
and
get-go that there
and
was
so I
not.
think
But
that
that my
I
point is, there's
think
no
that
depth, there's no bench, there's no intellectual bench on the right anymore. It's kind of deteriorated to a point of, a lot of people who are either very crude ideologues or just opportunists and bullshit artists. There, I'm being,
well, obviously,
I'm provoking you. You're not one of those people,
no, no, no,
but there
no.
are so
Yeah,
few of
no,
you, Chris.
obviously there are smart people on the right, um, but they're not the and I don't like using right and left. Let's say
Okay,
Republicans and Democrats. Okay,
okay,
the problem is that in the same way that we have two Americas, we have this America of the global economy and the dynamism and the all night restaurants and things like that. That's the Democratic Party is the party of that America, and the party of the America left behind is the Republican Party, and they have a commensurate shortage in sort of resources of expertise. There, maybe you could compare them in a way to the European labor parties when the European labor parties were first getting started in the late 19th century. They didn't have a lot of people with economics degrees and that kind of stuff. But it's very interesting. All those labor parties, all those working men's movements in Europe, they all went out and said, well, we got to get some. And there was a great, I would say, particularly in England, and I don't, but particularly in England, there was a sense of like, okay, if we want to run this country, we're going to have to start reading, you know. Now, I think to do that, it really does help to feel like you belong to something really meaningful and important. And so I think the role of Christianity I think Christianity was still very important in the working men's movements of, 100 years ago. It's tougher to muster that improving spirit when you think you just sort of like inhabit a blighted landscape and you're just kind of, you're the highlight of your day is sitting in your basement watching TV, and, you know, it's harder to do.
Yeah, I can see that. Which, which, how do we actually revive a kind of? I mean, the better example for me, and maybe we can cut some of those ers and rs. In Britain, we have a Etonian prime minister with a highly educated cabinet who are actually attempting to do what you're doing, to what you're proposing, which is integrate some of these movements into the mainstream party. The Tory party has always observed these things on its fringes, and its instinct is to co-opt, bring in, tame, and exploit if you're going to be
Mhm.
brutal politically.
Yeah.
The Republican Party doesn't seem to be in that position. It is so alienated, it feels, from the mainstream ruling elites, um, and that it was captured by this con man for 4 years, and it has ended. And let's be frank about this: ended with this mass delusion that the entire election was rigged, uh, and and that in fact every election, according to Donald Trump, including the ones he's won, is rigged. Now, this is a big problem in entering national politics. If you are a party, the majority of whose members do not believe that national elections are fair, are deliberately rigged by outside forces, lefties, liberals, and all the rest of it, and still do, even to this day, uh, how on earth can that become a viable political party or movement as opposed to a kind of anarchic nihilist protest?
Well, you know, people get really riled up during election campaigns in the weeks leading up to election day, and by election day, I think partisans are totally crazy. What we had this year, where one candidate whips these people who are in that state into maintaining that state for several weeks. Um, we've never had it before. We may not have it again. It may be a very special thing. I do not believe that when people calm down, they're going to be, you know, fired up. They're going to be convinced that this particular election was stolen. I think that it's going to be quite possible to sort of like move ahead on a calmer basis. Okay,